Imagine the desert sun has just set over the Sinai Peninsula. The air, which moments ago was a furnace of dust and light, now cools rapidly, carrying the scent of dry earth and wood smoke from 1,000 wandering campfires. In the center of this sprawling camp of 2 to 3 million people, there is a structure that doesn't quite belong. It's not a tent for sleeping, nor a market stall. It is a portable palace made of acacia wood, linen, and gold, a 5-layer, 60-foot-long shadow of heaven itself. This is the Tabernacle. Most of us have heard the word, maybe seen a flannel graph diagram in Sunday school. But here's the part nobody tells you. Every single artifact inside that tent, from the bronze altar at the gate to the gold box at the heart, is a deliberate, engineered key. And if you don't hold each one in your hands, intellectually and spiritually, you will never unlock the room where God promises to meet you. You stop at the entrance. The first thing that greets you isn't gold or incense. It's a massive, hollow box made of acacia wood, overlaid with bronze. It is 7.5 feet square and 4.5 feet high. The bronze altar. Now consider the detail that's usually skipped. The Hebrew text in Exodus 27 instructs that this altar must be crafted with a network of bronze grating, a mesh that sits halfway down inside the structure. This wasn't a solid stone block you could just pile wood on. It was a complex, engineered stove. But why the grating? Smoke and heat rise, sure, but the design forces the fire to be fed from beneath, while the blood of the sacrifice is poured at the base of the altar, running down onto the earth. Here's what most people never realize. The bronze altar is the place of judgment. Every animal brought here bore the sin of the one who laid hands on its head. The fire had to be kept burning continuously, not because God needed a light show, but because the transaction between holiness and brokenness was a constant, physical, visceral reality. The smell of that place wasn't sacred perfume. It was the smell of fat burning on hot metal, the smell of death, the weight of that altar. Imagine the logistics of moving a 20-ton bronze structure through a desert. Tells you something. You cannot approach the presence of the Creator without first standing at a place where something has to die in your place. That's the first key. The bronze altar is the gatekeeper. You cannot take a step further until you understand the gravity of what happens here at the entrance. If you felt the weight of that bronze grating, the reality of substitution settling into your chest, you are standing exactly where you need to be. This is the moment to commit. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when we move from judgment to purity. And in the comments, write the word substitution, because the altar taught us that something must die in your place, and that truth changes how you approach everything. But now, the priest doesn't go straight into the tent. He stops between the bronze altar and the entrance to the holy place. There is a second object here, one that often gets treated as a footnote. The bronze laver. It is a large basin of water, crafted from the mirrors of the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Stop and picture that. A basin made of polished metal. But it wasn't just a bowl for washing hands. The text in Exodus 30 says, "When they go into the tent of meeting, or when they approach the altar to minister, they shall wash with water, that they may not die." This isn't hygiene. It's preparation. The priest's hands are stained with the blood and ashes of the sacrifice from the bronze altar. He has touched death. Now he must cleanse before touching anything connected to the life of God. The laver represents the internal shift from judgment to purity. It's the moment where the guilt of the sacrifice has been dealt with, but the memory of the act, the residue, must be symbolically washed away. Notice something crucial. The laver does not replace the altar. You can't just clean your hands if you haven't first paid the price. The order matters. First, death. Then, purification. Now you are ready to cross the threshold. The first thing you see inside the tent is a table on the north side. It's made of acacia wood, overlaid with pure gold, measuring about 3 feet long, 1.5 feet wide, and 2 feet high. On this table sits 12 loaves of bread in 2 stacks of 6, with pure frankincense on top. This is the table of showbread, or in Hebrew, lechem hapanim, the bread of the presence. The cultural assumption is that this was just a snack for the priests. It wasn't. The bread was laid out every Sabbath, and the old bread was eaten by the priests only in a holy place. This bread isn't food for God. It's a perpetual acknowledgement that God is the source of all physical and spiritual sustenance. 12 loaves for the 12 tribes of Israel. You are continually in front of him, before his face. And that single detail changes everything. The bread is a covenant meal, a constant reminder that the relationship with the divine is not just transactional, altar, or purificatory, laver, but sustaining. Every week, fresh bread. Every week, the priest would eat the old bread in the presence of God. It's a quiet, reciprocal act. God provides, man acknowledges. But look at the wood. The acacia wood is a desert tree, hard and resistant to rot. It survives in arid conditions. The gold overlay speaks of divinity covering the human. Everything in this room is pointing to a fusion of the earthy and the heavenly. This bread before the face of God. It asks something of you. This is a good moment to belong. Subscribe to stay with us as we walk deeper into the holy place where light and incense await. And in the comments, share what bread of the presence stirs in you. Sustenance, waiting, or the ache for a covenant meal you didn't know you were hungry for. Across from the table, on the south side of the holy place, stands an object that defies simple engineering. The golden lampstand, the menorah. This is not a simple candelabra you can buy at a home decor store. God gave Moses explicit instructions. It must be made from 1 single talent of pure gold, approximately 34 kilograms of solid metal hammered into shape. Not cast, not soldered. Hammered. Archaeology and ancient smiths will tell you that making a 7-branched lampstand from a single block of gold, with cups, buds, and petals shaped by hammering, is a masterpiece of ancient craft that borders on the miraculous. It must have taken an enormous amount of skill, and perhaps a supernatural assistance. The lampstand holds the light. 7 lamps filled with pure olive oil, burning continuously from evening until morning. But within the spirit of the tabernacle, the light isn't just illumination. It represents knowledge, revelation, the very word of God as a lamp to your feet. The fire of the bronze altar was about judgment. The fire of the lampstand is about guidance. Remember the last point about the bread? Now imagine the scene. The gold of the table reflects the flames of the lampstand. The light flickers on the golden walls and the woven curtains of blue, purple, and scarlet. The priest moves in a space filled with the smell of oil and gold, the texture of the holy linen on his skin, the soft sound of bare feet on the ground. But just as you are settling into the warmth of that light, the priest moves further into the tent. He doesn't go straight through the curtain at the back. He stops in front of a smaller, square altar. This is the altar of incense. It is made of acacia wood, overlaid with gold, and it is only 18 inches square and 3 feet high. It doesn't carry the blood of bulls or the bread for sustenance. It burns incense. a specific blend of spices, stacte, onycha, galbanum, and pure frankincense, ground into a powder. The smell of this incense is not optional. The text says it is to be burned morning and evening perpetually. Now watch what happens. The incense cloud rises inside the holy place. But the text reveals a crucial detail. This altar of incense is placed before the veil that is before the Ark of the Covenant. The smoke of the incense rises and drifts into the Holy of Holies. The cloud of incense becomes a physical barrier. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest would take burning coals from the bronze altar and put them in a censer, then fill his hands with sweet incense. He would go through the veil and put the incense on the fire so that the cloud of incense would cover the mercy seat that is upon the testimony, so that he would not die. The incense is a protector. It's a screen of prayer and sweetness that allows a human being to stand in the immediate presence of a consuming fire. You are now standing within inches of the final curtain, the veil. This isn't a sheet. It's a woven tapestry, 4 inches thick, made of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and fine twisted linen, with cherubim embroidered into the fabric. The text in Exodus 26 tells us it was suspended on 4 pillars of acacia wood overlaid with gold. The veil separates the holy place from the Holy of Holies. It is the ultimate barrier. Here's what most people miss. The veil is the third and final lock. The bronze altar was for judgment, the laver for cleansing, the veil for separation. You can be forgiven. You can be purified, but you are still outside the direct presence of God. And then there is the Ark of the Covenant. It's a chest of acacia wood overlaid with pure gold, measuring approximately 3 feet 9 inches long, 2 feet 3 inches wide, and 2 feet 3 inches high. Inside it, according to the writer of Hebrews, were 3 items: a golden jar of manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the stone tablets of the law. The manna is a reminder of God's provision. The rod represents God's chosen leadership and miraculous power. The law is the covenant, the moral reflection of God's character. The box itself is the throne of God on earth. But the lid of that chest is where the weight of the universe settles. The mercy seat, or kapharet, is a single slab of solid gold. 2 cherubim of hammered gold are on either end, facing each other, their wings spread upward, covering the seat. The space between the cherubim is where the Shekinah glory, the visible manifest presence of God, would dwell. This is the point of everything. All the bronze, all the gold, all the blood, all the washing, all the incense, all the bread, all the light, it all leads to this empty space above the gold. Here's the deepest layer. The high priest, once a year on Yom Kippur, would enter through the veil. He would sprinkle the blood of the bull and the goat onto the mercy seat. The blood touches the gold. The law inside the ark cries out for judgment, but the blood on the lid creates a covering. The word kapharet comes from the root kaphar, which means to cover or to atone. The blood covers the broken law. You have walked through every layer, and now you stand at the place where heaven touches earth. Subscribe to continue this journey through the shadows. We are about to see how each artifact becomes a living person. And in the comments, leave the word kaphar, the covering that changes everything. Now consider the paradox of the tabernacle. You have a structure that is intensely exclusive. Only the high priest, once a year, can enter the innermost room. The veil is a physical and spiritual barrier. But the New Testament authors, particularly in the book of Hebrews, make a stunning claim. They look at these 9 artifacts: the bronze altar, the laver, the table of showbread, the lampstand, the altar of incense, the veil, the ark, the mercy seat, and they say, "These are a copy and shadow of the heavenly things." Every single artifact is a prophecy pointing to a single person. The bronze altar points to the cross, where the final sacrifice was made. The laver points to the cleansing power of the Spirit and the Word. The table of showbread points to Jesus as the bread of life, the sustenance of the soul. The lampstand points to Jesus as the light of the world, the source of all truth. The altar of incense points to Christ's intercession and the prayers of the saints ascending to heaven. The veil. The Gospel of Matthew records that at the moment of Christ's death, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The barrier was removed, and the ark, the mercy seat, the Holy of Holies itself. He becomes the place where God and man meet. You have walked the path. You felt the heat of the bronze altar. You washed at the laver. You saw the bread and the light. You smelled the incense. You stood before the veil. And now you see what all of this was really about. It was never just about a tent in the desert. It was a blueprint for intimacy. Every measurement, every thread, every drop of blood was saying one thing. He wants to dwell with you. But the path to that presence requires a fundamental reordering of everything you believe about access. The physical structure is gone, but the spiritual progression remains. You must stop at the altar. You must be washed. You must eat of the true bread. You must walk in the light. You must let your prayers ascend as incense. And then, with boldness, you enter where the veil used to be. Now you see it. Every thread, every drop of blood, every hammered piece of gold was a shadow pointing to a reality you can stand in today. If this tabernacle was a shadow, then what body cast it? The reason the tabernacle had such intricate detail was to teach humanity that the path to the Creator is real, costly, and yet available. One thread, the one connecting the bronze altar to the mercy seat, remains open. The tabernacle was a temporary tent. The true tabernacle is not made with human hands. And the most important artifact of all, that's the empty tomb. The true mercy seat is not a box in a museum, but a living presence that you can experience right now, in this moment. The desert journey is over, but the entrance into the holy presence has only just begun. The veil, that 4-inch thick woven barrier, is the hinge of the entire structure. Ancient Jewish tradition claims 2 horses tied to opposite ends could not pull it apart. It was designed to be impenetrable. Yet the high priest, on the single day he entered, did not push the veil aside like a curtain. He walked through it sideways, slipping between the folds, carrying the smoking censer and the bowl of blood. The moment he passed through, he entered absolute silence. No lampstand light, no bread, no gold reflections from the table, just the glow of the coals in his censer and the terrifying weight of an unseen presence. What do you do when you stand in a room where the walls are made of woven angels and the floor is the dust of the Holy of Holies? You don't speak. You don't move unnecessarily. The high priest would place the incense on the coals, watch the cloud rise and fill the space, and then, in that thick, sweet darkness, he would sprinkle the blood. 7 times. Each drop a confession, a plea, a restoration. The sound of blood hitting gold is not something most of us have ever imagined. But that sound was the only voice allowed in that room. Outside, the entire nation held its breath. The priests stood at the altar. The people pressed against the courtyard gates. A rope was tied around the high priest's ankle, because if the sacrifice was rejected, if his heart was not right, The tradition says he would be struck dead in the presence of the Lord, and no one could enter to retrieve his body. The rope was a practical acknowledgement of mortality. You can feel the tension in that moment. The entire year's atonement hung on a single man's obedience and a single drop of blood. Now consider what happened 30 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. The Roman army, under Titus, destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. The golden menorah was carried away in triumph. The Ark of the Covenant had already disappeared centuries earlier, likely taken during the Babylonian invasion. The Holy of Holies was empty. The physical structure that housed the smoke and the gold and the silence was gone. And yet the pattern did not vanish. The early Christians, scattered across the empire, began to describe themselves as the new temple. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthians, "Do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit?" The physical tent of acacia and linen was replaced by a living structure of flesh and spirit. This is the deepest layer of the mystery. The tabernacle was never meant to be permanent. It was a teaching tool, a preschool for the soul. The bronze altar taught about substitution. The laver taught about preparation. The table of showbread taught about dependence. The lampstand taught about revelation. The altar of incense taught about intercession. The veil taught about separation. The ark taught about covenant. The mercy seat taught about the meeting place. But all of these lessons were leading to a single moment when the teacher would step out from behind the object lesson and say, "I am the reality." Christian theology argues that Jesus of Nazareth fulfilled every single one of these symbols. His body was the veil that tore. His blood was the offering that covered the law. His resurrection was the fire that never went out. But here's the part that demands your attention right now. If the tabernacle is a shadow and Christ is the substance, then the journey through the tabernacle is not just historical information. It is a map for your own soul. You cannot skip the bronze altar and rush to the mercy seat. You cannot pretend you don't need the laver. You cannot live without the bread and the light. The order is fixed. The path is linear. And the destination is not a tent, but a relationship. The writer of Hebrews makes a startling statement. He says, "We have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, that is, through his flesh." The curtain was his body. The veil was his physical existence. When he died, the way was opened. But notice the tense. The writer says, "We have confidence," not "we will have." Present tense. The entrance is available now. You don't need a high priest with bells on his robe and a rope around his ankle. You don't need a 4-inch thick woven curtain. You don't need a bronze altar in a desert. The access has been relocated from a geographical location to a living person. This changes how you experience worship. If the tabernacle was a map, then worship is not a song you sing for 3 minutes on Sunday morning. It is the act of walking through the courtyard, passing the laver, entering the holy place, and stepping through the veil. It is a conscious, intentional movement toward the presence. The objects of the tabernacle are not museum pieces. They are stages in the journey. Now here is the thread that remains open. The tabernacle was destroyed. The ark is lost. The gold is scattered. But the pattern is eternal. What happened to the actual artifacts? History records that the menorah was displayed in Rome. The golden table may have been melted down. The bronze altar, the laver, the incense altar, they are lost to time. But the shadows they cast still fall across every soul that seeks the Creator. You are not looking for a box of gold in a cave. You are looking for the space between the cherubim where the silence speaks. And that silence is not empty. It is filled with the presence of the one who designed the entire structure to lead you home. You have walked the path. Now the question is not whether you understand the artifacts. The question is whether you will step through the veil yourself. You are standing at the torn curtain, and the question presses in. Subscribe now to anchor this moment. We are about to see how the shadows give way to the substance, and you don't want to miss the final unveiling. In the comments, write torn, because the veil that separated us is no longer whole. The silence at the threshold is not the absence of sound. It is the weight of a presence so dense that the air itself feels thicker. Imagine standing where the high priest stood, the blood still warm on his fingers, the smoke from the censer curling around his face, the gold of the mercy seat catching the last flicker of light before the cloud envelops everything. You cannot see the cherubim now. You cannot see the ark. You are surrounded by the fragrance of incense and the awareness that you are not alone. This is the moment the entire structure was built for. Every board of acacia wood, every thread of blue and scarlet, every hammer stroke on gold, every drop of blood on bronze was a preparation for this single point of contact between heaven and earth. The tabernacle was never a house for God in the way we think of a house. It was a womb of encounter, a place where the infinite compressed itself into a space small enough for a human soul to survive the meeting. You may never walk through a physical veil. You may never see a golden lampstand or touch the table of showbread. But the path remains open. The altar still stands at the entrance of every honest heart. The laver still waits for hands stained by the weight of living in a broken world. The bread still nourishes those who hunger for something deeper than daily bread. The light still burns for those who walk in darkness. The incense still rises when a soul cries out from the depths. And the veil, that ancient barrier, is torn from top to bottom, not by human hands, but by the one who said, "It is finished." The desert tent is gone. The stones of the temple lie scattered. But the pattern of approach, the blueprint of intimacy, the architecture of reconciliation remains woven into the fabric of reality itself. Every time you pause and acknowledge that you cannot fix yourself, you stand at the bronze altar. Every time you confess and release the residue of guilt, you pass through the laver. Every time you open the scriptures and find sustenance, you eat from the table. Every time truth illuminates a dark corner of your life, the lampstand flickers. Every time you breathe a prayer when words fail, incense ascends. Every time you dare to believe that you are welcome in the presence of holiness, you step through the veil. The shadows have served their purpose. The substance remains. Now the path is yours. Not a physical tent in the desert, not a building of stone and cedar, but a living way, opened, accessible, present. You do not need to travel to Sinai. You do not need to find an ancient artifact. The mercy seat is not hidden in a cave beneath Jerusalem. It is wherever a human being, awakened to the reality of their own need, turns toward the light and steps forward. You have felt the heat. You have known the cleansing. You have tasted the bread. You have seen the light. You have offered the prayer. And now, the veil is no longer between you and the presence. Step forward.